Seems to get up nice and started. Seems to get up nice and started. So this is gonna be an interesting sprint race because yesterday's sprint was quite chaotic actually, as that basically the first turn in there was a bunch of destruction and a bunch of chaos, making so that Alonso and pretty much McLaren team were pretty much out of the sprint. And well, it's pretty much one of the worst, but to be honest, it represents America as pretty much being the demolition derby country as it is. But hopefully to God, right, that this race they'll probably fix up, and actually on the first turn they're taking it extra carefully because the first turn is pretty much one of, if not the most chaotic turns, especially in this one because they're all focusing on that corner. If those suddenly need to go wide, just in case. But you have to blame on Hulkenberg because Hulkenberg was the one who basically took in the corner, proceeded to bump into Lando, which bumps into Piastri, and then basically caused that chaos. So let's hope to God that Hulkenberg, who's in 11th, doesn't really fuck shit up today. So So basically, we have Hadjar, then we have Stroll, Albon, Ocon, Sportiletto, Colapinto, Gasly, Sonoda, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Berman, Antonelli, Piastri, Hamilton, Russell, Leclerc, Norris, and then Verstappen. Which is actually quite not surprising because simply Verstappen always gets on pole or basically gets in uh not only on pole but also on was it not pole on podium, yeah, podium. Let's see. So it's actually quite surprising since Charles Leclerc is up on pole. Actually, not on pole, podium. But believe it, Max Verstappen, I actually believe that he could potentially take out basically could just take out from the rest of the pack, especially from the first turn in, because if he managed to take out, which he's probably gonna be, he would potentially win it. Who knows? It's quite a straightforward grid, as from that first turn it's kind of goes straight, like have some big bends, but overall kind of straight. Then we go over to turn 11, which is a major bend, then turn 12, which is another major bend, and then from there it basically gets to much more larger bends where for 15 is a large U, so pretty much there's a lot of stable acceleration from there, where it goes from turn 90, which could be an increase or decrease depending. Therefore 20 is a nice sharp one, and then it goes straight down to turn 1. Where attack temperatures are 45 degrees, air temperatures are 28 degrees Celsius. So, show about why we have formation lap going underway while Max Verstappen is in fact charging ahead with Lando Norris behind Leclerc, then Russell, then Hamilton, and then we have Piastri. Um, yeah, Piastri, which is quite ironically keeping it nice and behind, and then we have Antonelli the Berman. But it seems like Carlos Tate is keeping the rest of them behind. Right, with Alonso, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Tsunoda, Gasly, and Bortoleto, who's beaten up from Ocon, and then Albert the Stoll. Then Hajar is pretty much last behind. And I don't know if he's trying to make it so that the engines overheat by the time he comes back. Maybe, who knows? Wait, no, wait. And- Oh no. Oh, Mario Andretti, yeah, thank God. Who was the other driver for a sec? Because Mario Andretti is one of the best American ones. So straight off the bat, we have nice telemetry, of course. So it seems as if it's not bad so far, as that. So we have Hajar who's gonna mostly take up mostly all the time in the formation since, of course, he's nice and behind, but unfortunately he actually in fact catched up. So that's a nice thing just to see. It was now in fact forming right now. And all the cars are getting slotted in nice and well. Looks as if Hajar is the one who's last and pretty much going to overheat the engines. So, soon as I can see the Grand Prix is underway, and straight off the bat where we actually see Max Verstappen still up. I don't know why, but my recording's a bit slow. I'm gonna quickly catch you up, of course. But so far, it looks like if Max Verstappen is in fact still charging ahead. Yeah, the Sky thing is not really working as well. Um, Sky Sports broadcasting is kind of having a delay, but let's just commentate from here. So basically, it's as if Max Verstappen is still out front with Leclerc, Norris, and Hamilton, but now we in fact now the recording started. Let's actually see the chaos unfold. Oh, basically the first turn, everyone actually smoothed up. They learned their lesson from the sprint of not try not to collide into each other and keep it nice and safe. So they go through the turns, go through the turns. I'll go based on the commentary. Okay, okay, okay. Nice quarter cutting over here. All the cars are grouped up together. No surprise, this is actually the first of 56 laps in this race. So we have a nice bunch of cars together. Outside, and then here goes Verstappen, and then there's a lot of dust on the track currently, but don't worry, that doesn't really matter. Ooh, Ferrari is catching up to mm, there has been in fact Yeah, we have yellow. We don't know where that yellow come from. It's probably from the dust. Mm. Well, but Alex Albon is in fact really behind. He could catch up. He could not catch up. Who knows? Okay, okay, okay. So we actually see fact right that the staff. Okay, we the all charging through. DRS is in fact enabled in lap 2. This is actually a nice thing just to see. So as you can see, Verstappen on the data he actually shows that he's ahead with Leclerc still catching up. Nicely defending the position from Norris. Well, Albert is pretty much in the back. He could have potential in order to catch up. We need to make sure that he can actually cut some corners and actually, in fact, cut some time down just so that he can catch up to Isaac Hadjar. So it seems like from the official recording that broadcasting. Ooh, Carlos Sainz is gonna go for a nice overtake from Ollie Behrman, putting it behind. Now Ryan Sainz is 8th, 9th is Behrman. Alex Albert needs to in fact catch up if he wants to in fact get a nice position, because overall it seems like as if he's gonna stay at 20th if he doesn't catch up. Verstappen has in fact made the fastest lap of the race with 1 minute and 40 seconds. Not a surprise, since Max Verstappen is pretty much one of, if not the OP drivers so far that we've seen in modern F1. But who knows, he could actually in fact pace himself and in fact get himself a nice new record. Who knows? Because I would see right that from the official data that Verstappen is in fact is charging ahead. He's pretty much going to make sure that there'll be a comfortable gap between Verstappen and between himself and Leclerc, just so that he can actually in fact get himself a nice comfortable win. It seems as if that's going to be the case. Ooh, it says if ooh, it will in fact Lando Norris take back the position from Lando. Come on, Lando. Because here's if Leclerc is in fact defending the position from Lando Norris. Makes over that Charles Leclerc is in fact comfortably in second, while Norris is comfortably in third. We need to make sure that Piastri is in fact going to catch up to Hamilton and overtake. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. So Verstappen is in fact taking a nice comfortable gap. We're going to see the head-to-head between Verstappen and Leclerc. That the so it seems as if right that the lap is between Verstappen and the interval is basically 3 seconds. So pretty much Verstappen is in fact quite comfortable in his position between himself and Leclerc and pretty much the rest of the track. We're actually going to keep track of this as that this gap could increase or decrease depending on track conditions and basically the performance of both drivers so far. Norris is literally touching against Charles Leclerc, but Leclerc is keeping it nice and comfortable. While Lando is trying to figure out a way in order to overtake him, which each time basically increases the gap. He needs to, in fact, focus down on the track, and once he gets close enough, try to do the overtake. But what is he doing right now? It seems as if like he's thinking about trying to overtake all the time. Lando always trying to lunges in instead of trying to fucking aim for the corners. You see that's the main problem with Lando Norris. He always goes on the outside and trying to lunge in to get that position, even though that will just mostly fail. And of course, Max Verstappen literally breaks his record again with 1 minute and 39 seconds, which is absolutely fucking beautiful. So it just shows that fucking Verstappen's in fact quite comfortable, and then he may actually win he may actually win first place in this Grand Prix, um, due to his outrageous performance in this race so far. But the gap between, but there is an increase of gap between Norris and Piastri, as we can see. Since the gap is 0.764 seconds, but the gap between Verstappen and Leclerc is pretty much a solid the 2.6 seconds on average. Ooh, Charles Leclerc going in nice and well. Ooh, swift ahead goes Lewis Hamilton. There's a battle for third between Norris and Hamilton, which will not be the case, unfortunately, because Norris is in fact keeping his pace quite comfortable and trying to increase the gap between himself and Hamilton. Ooh, a nice yellow flag apparently happened. We don't know what it may actually happen to, in fact, cause that yellow flag. We actually find out right now. So it seems as if Antonelli is fucked. So we're gonna find out what happened to Antonelli, because so Antonelli seems to be in 20th now, and Carlos Sainz seems to be. I do not know what happened between Carlos Sainz and Antonelli, but they seem to be absolutely fucked. It seems this Carlos Sainz may in fact be retiring from the race. Yep. So now he's running. Oh, the contact of John Russell is wild, and now right. Yeah. So virtual safety car is actually up for these sections. Now it's back going towards pretty much the whole track now. It's So pretty much it's still chaotic how it is. It still represents America as being the number one chaotic mess that it always has been. Co- Oh! Carlos Sainz was trying to stay in and defend his position, but then Antonelli just ran into his tyre. But it says that from Kimi Antonelli's perspective, that Carlos Sainz in fact hit him. So so it says if Carlos Sainz is in fact out. It still seems like if Alex Albon could be out also. I don't know if Albon is out. I don't know if he will be out. Who knows? He says he'll still be in the race, but nope, he's not out according to the data. But it seems like it's Carlos Sainz only. Yep. So Alex Albon seems to in fact be pitted for to get some new tires on during this time. Seems that most of, if not all, the drivers so far are gonna pit in order to get some new tires on. It's absolutely wild of what is happening. But it seems so far, in fact, the virtual safety car is going to end eventually, while and then this way so like that, as soon as it ends, like Max Verstappen is going to simply speed off. And it ended, and now it's a good time for Max Verstappen, since in fact it happened at the first turn. And now he's going to simply speed off and increase that gap by a massive head margin so far, making the gap back to an average of 3 seconds. But Alex Albon and Antonelli are still in the back. I'll actually recommend that Antonelli would in fact box just so he can fix up the car and see what's wrong with the car. So still the battle is kind of similar to the sprint, but the main difference between the sprint and this race is that there's way less destruction apart from that turn between Antonelli and Carlos Sainz, which seems to be in Carlos Sainz's fault since he in fact charged in and pretty much didn't leave enough gap for Antonelli in order to turn in, and therefore Antonelli would be unintentionally be hit by Carlos Sainz, and Carlos Sainz would be out while Antonelli would still be in, but at dead last since his car is now affected by that hit. The but the investigation will happen after the race between Antonelli and Carlos Sainz. But so far, it's as if Ocon could actually catch up with Hajjar pretty much versing him just so they could get to a high position between well, Antonelli and Albon are pretty much in the back. Albon could in fact catch up to he has a better sort of car, while Antonelli is pretty much has an injured car after the collision between Carlos Sainz and in fact himself. But apart from that, right, let's in fact focus on the main race itself. there's a massive gap between Behrman and, in fact, Hulkenberg. About a 3 second gap between both of them, so that there could be, in fact, be a separation in groups between the first group between Verstappen and Behrman, and then the second group of Hulkenberg and Hadjar, and the third small group of Antonelli and Albon, which could be nicely insane. I see that there could be some overtaking between these two groups so far. Okay, let's in fact get back onto the race itself. Uh, so Norris and Hamilton are still on a similar racing line so far, while Hamilton is undercutting it a little bit more. But let's in fact focus back onto race itself, as Verstappen and Leclerc literally take off from each other, having a nice gap of average of 3 seconds. Well, we have a nice gap between Behrman and Hulkenberg of around 4 seconds or 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds to be precise. And the gap between Hadjar and Antonelli would be a solid 5 seconds. In this case, Antonelli is pretty much in his own race since he cannot catch up to Hadjar in time just to do it. But let's see if I take back towards the place between Verstappen and Leclerc, because Verstappen seems to in fact mastered this track so far, leaving the grid behind, pretty much racing along himself at this point, racing his own ghost, because it seems that there's no battle between Verstappen and Leclerc, since Leclerc is so far behind of Max Verstappen. Okay, okay. So pit window will be lap 12 to 18. Lapping nice and early will basically be beneficial to them, so that if the majority of the, in fact, the track pits eventually, it would in fact as later in the race, um it would be beneficial to them. It seems as though this is a nice boring race so far. Not something that I could really talk about that much since it's nice and boring. Not really surprised, because the Americans are pretty much known to be having one, if not the most boring F1 Grand Prix so far, apart from the chaos and destruction. And it's probably because, right, there's multiple groups, and as you can see, Bo, there is so many groups. So there's Verstappen, who's racing his own ghost, and then we have pretty much Leclerc and Norris pretty much racing each other. Then we have a massive gap between Hamilton and Piastri, which is a solid 3 second gap. We actually seen a nice gap, healthy gap on average of 3 seconds between each driver in this Grand Prix so far. So basically, may not be any overtaking in this race, since pretty much everyone else is taking up a nice healthy gap between each other. While Verstappen is pretty much just racing ahead, having a gap, I believe, of fucking 4 seconds. Yep, 4 fucking seconds between himself and Leclerc, literally giving Leclerc no chance in order to get pole position. And Hamilton pretty much doing the same with Piastri also, with a nice gap between with a gap between Hamilton and Piastri of 3 seconds. Pretty much not giving Piastri any chance of catching up and getting that fourth position. It seems as if this is in fact Ferrari's best race so far in this Grand Prix. Like, this is something that I'm actually celebrating for, because simply this whole Grand Prix and even this whole season so far, we have actually seen Hamilton, uh, Leclerc, or generally Ferrari in general to win a Grand Prix, or even get into a nice podium. Mm. Lando Norris seems to be going very wide, while Verstappen is literally going ahead of 4.3 second gap between himself and Leclerc. And we have a nice gap between Norris and Hamilton of 2 seconds. And then a gap between Hamilton and Piastri of 3 seconds. 3.8 seconds, around 4 seconds. So far, Berman, and the gap between Berman and Hulkenberg is 3.4 seconds. And now, in fact, there's in fact multiple groups. Verstappen pretty much racing against himself and may actually, in fact, break the record at the track now of having the fastest lap. Well, Leclerc and Norris look like they may actually have a battle, as that they may actually fight for second position. Well, Hamilton and Piastri have a gap of 3.4 seconds. This is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So Verstappen at this point is literally racing against himself, as you can see by this impressive gap of like almost 5 seconds. Literally, and 5 seconds has literally passed between the gap between Max Verstappen and Leclerc. We're gonna see a gap between Hamilton and Piastri of 4.2 seconds, and a gap between Antonelli and Albon at the back around 2 seconds. So now nowhere we just see a nice gap between Albon and Portiletto of fucking 11 seconds, which is absolutely insane and literally something that I would not recommend, and pretty much is a DNF of its own, since that Portiletto will not be able to catch up unless he managed to find ways in order to cut down time, and most importantly, find places where you can accelerate early and undertake these corners a lot more faster. But so far, let's see if I focus on Verstappen and Leclerc, as they have a gap of 6 seconds, which is absolutely insane. But the pretty much pit is pretty much a solid sometime of 4.2 seconds, and being in pit for 25 seconds, which ain't recommended. But Verstappen is literally ahead. He is in a comfortable point where, okay, that Leclerc defending against Norris. Will we actually see Leclerc and Norris in fact overtake? We may actually see a nice overtake between both of them. They're so close. It's the touching and touching. But nope, maybe, who knows? We're literally just seeing a little bit between. Come on, Norris, come on, Norris. Oh! It seems in fact not. Leclerc has done defending quite well against Norris. Because you see, right, the gap between us and Leclerc and in fact Norris is solid 9.09, literally about a second gap. But the gap between Verstappen and Leclerc, we had to put at 6 seconds, literally ahead and literally dominating the race so far. I believe that this is going to be a comfortable win for Verstappen unless he manages to fuck up at some parts. Well, Bortoletto is probably going to stay in 19th place since in fact his gap between himself and Albon is around 11 seconds. We do not know how much of a gap will be, how, how much a gap between ah. But so far, right, the active battles that we actually see, right, is Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc because as Lando Norris tries to in fact pounce and lounge and most importantly lunge it in just so they can overtake, Charles Leclerc is doing defending quite well. Probably because he doesn't have to do damage defending because each lunge causes Lando Norris to be even more further behind since that he loses a couple speed as he proceeds to do each lunge. Now, right, Lando Norris has to, in fact, figure out when is the perfect time in order to lunge and, in fact, overtake. Because you cannot lunge too early or, in fact, too late, as that you may not even get that position. Ooh, Antonelli, doing nice. To be honest though, there ain't been that much battles, but the most impressive thing of this race so far is Verstappen's gap between himself and Leclerc, and pretty much the whole gap in general, and especially between Hulkenberg and Alonso, as it's around 4.451, which is absolutely insane. Ah, the gap is going. It says 7 seconds he actually reached up to. We actually reached up to 8 seconds, and eventually to 10 seconds. Will we actually reach up to 10 seconds in this Grand Prix so far between himself and Leclerc? He's literally put his ultimate performance on this Grand Prix so far. Like, this is honestly surprising coming out of Max Verstappen as like, he managed to find some pace, some performance, something in order to get himself to accelerate way ahead of the rest of the race and now pretty much racing against his own ghost while Leclerc's gap between himself and Norris is 0.681. There could be in fact a battle for second place. Who knows? Because they're so close. But he needs to make sure that but Norris needs to make sure that he's comfortable behind Leclerc and that he can catch up nice and close before doing that lunge because he may actually in fact lose the battle if he lunges a little bit too early. He needs to in fact lunge nice and perfectly in order to get that second position. But so far the gap between himself and Leclerc is around 0.2228. But so far, right, the gap between Albert and Bortoletto is a solid 10. So you may actually see that gap closing in for each of these laps. If we're on 18th or 56th laps, we may actually see by 40 or 49 lap that Bortoletto has closed that gap between himself and Albon. Ooh, Verstappen having a 0.8 gap between himself and Leclerc. Literally embarrassing the rest of the grid and calling them nice and slow while at it. 7.875, 0.88. Okay, 0.88 seems to be the biggest gap we actually saw so far in this Grand Prix. Oh, 7.86. Oh my god, 7.871. Literally breaking records in this Grand Prix so far. 7.911. If we have to see a gap of literal 8 seconds eventually within this Grand Prix. But so far, the battle between Leclerc and Norris is quite comfortable, as that Leclerc is trying to storm ahead while Norris is trying to catch up to his wing and trying to pretty much overtake. Ooh, Albon and Hadjar. I was about to take Hadjar, but unfortunately that overtake wasn't going to be of the case. Oh, we actually reached of a gap of 8 seconds. This is absolutely wild. 8.9, 8.9, 9 seconds. We have reached 9 seconds. This gap of 9 seconds. This is absolutely insane. Oh, Lando Norris, we went to wheel against Charles Leclerc, but Charles Leclerc has, in fact, been defending quite well. Oh, the lunge of Lando Norris against Charles Leclerc. Oh, and Charles Leclerc literally defended it quite well. Ooh, but this gap, this utter gap between Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc is insane, and the overtaking is so close between both of them. But we cannot literally mention that with the gap between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, as that gap is getting ever so big, and we're actually seeing heading over to 10 seconds. Like we 9.2, 9.2. Max Verstappen is simply legendary. A 9.5 gap. This is actually getting even and even better for Max Verstappen and literally putting himself in the Hall of Fame. He has become utterly the best driver. Pretty much, I believe there could be a race between Ayrton Senna and Verstappen just to see who the best racer is. Put them both in the same car and zoom them past if both of them were alive. But unfortunately, Ayrton Senna is unfortunately dead. But I would like to see that battle on this track because simply to Senna is a good driver and is in fact one of the best drivers who like Max Verstappen over here, as this gap is literally utterly insane. But let's see the gap between Leclerc and Norris of 0.029. There could be a potential battle between both of them. And Lando Norris overtakes Leclerc and takes second position. And now, right, now, now you see a gap between Hamilton and Leclerc of 1 second. But the gap between Leclerc. Ooh! We had to see on the line. Broadcast it now. He actually overtakes it nice and well. Look at that beautiful overtake from Lando Norris towards Charles Leclerc. Finally completing that massive, I mean by massive achievement. And now Lando Norris has to in fact start versing against Max Verstappen, as that gap has reached to 10 seconds. Over 10 seconds. 10.9 seconds is the biggest gap between both of them so far. Okay, okay, 10.9 is the gap between Lando Norris and Verstappen. Hopefully, to God, like during the as we go along with these Grand Prix, that we actually see this gap decreasing. Now we reached 11 seconds. Officially, 11 seconds is the biggest gap we actually seen so far in this season. So notice, this in fact finds a pace and absolutely obliterate the track. But the gap between Hamilton and Piastri is about 2.6. Which ain't that bad. And Charles Leclerc seems to in fact be pitting. And it seems as if Verstappen is dominating the whole track. Ooh, it says that Leclerc and Hamilton are both fighting positions. But currently on the data, it seems as if he's boxed, and now Leclerc is going to get out around 9th position. Ooh, so far, the gap between Verstappen and Norris is about 10 seconds. But I honestly believe Norris would in fact lead in the charge of trying to decrease that gap in and pretty much trying to catch up to Verstappen. I'm getting kind of hungry right now. Mm. Okay, since it's different. Hamilton has set the fastest first sector lap of 26 point something. Verstappen is making that gap even bigger and making Lando Norris's life even harder. So since the Piastri's what the engineers made Piastri do is try to save on the tires and try not to make him pit for some reason, which is quite unfortunate because if he's back up to pace, his best pace, then he could in fact overtake Hamilton. But let's in fact see Verstappen's telemetry. He steps on the throttle immediately right out the corner and accelerates as much as he can because knowing his telemetry would help us to further understand how the fuck he's getting so much. brakes early, then gradually goes on the throttle, then brakes early, gradually goes on the throttle even more. When you make sure right by the time he actually exits out the corner, he's full on the throttle. Let's see the head-to-head now. 11.43. Even though it's actually quite surprising that pretty much the commentators of the official F1 aren't actually putting as much effort onto Max Verstappen. The gap is absolutely insane between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. They see Leclerc do a nice overtake over Nico Hulkenberg. Leclerc is on new tires, he can in fact catch up much more easily. It's as if gap between Piastri and Russell about 1 second, Piastri and Hamilton of 4 seconds. It says if an average is about 10 to 11 seconds of the gap. Hmm. This is the back marker is Esteban Ocon. Ooh. Yeah, by the time Norris actually completes that turn and gets that exit, Verstappen's literally at the next turning. There's a nice gap between Hamilton and Piastri, with Russell trying to catch up and overtake Piastri. Russell and Leclerc has a gap of 8 seconds. So far there's multiple gaps. Hulkenberg and Alonso are 8 seconds. Lawson is around 3 seconds. Lawson and Antonelli is about 7 seconds. Antonelli Albon is about 3 seconds. Albert and Colin Pinto is around 3 seconds. So we have an average of gap between everyone else is around 3 seconds. This happened is about boxing. Oh no, that's Yuki Tsunoda! But to be honest, though, you can't really blame him for this difficult weekend, as that it's extremely hot. 25 seconds between Verstappen and oh my god. 25. Says that the gap is now decreasing between Charles Leclerc and Verstappen. Well, Russell has gone all the way back for his pit. I'm back, and now. So far, Verstappen and Leclerc's gap is a solid 6 seconds, but now it's increasing compared. Oh, Bama literally went straight across and spun out. And Lucas Slaughter managed to avoid him, which is actually quite nice. Gap between Leclerc and Norris is about 2 seconds. Yeah, it seems as if he moved under braking, and that he had to just overtake via the dirt and cause Ollie just to spin out, which looks magnificent, especially for a spin out. Verstappen and Leclerc is around 6 seconds. But Leclerc and Norris is around 1.75, which seems if they're going to catch up and have a nice battle for second position. But Hamilton has no chance for third position, as the gap between both of them is around 8.2 seconds. And it is as if Piastri may not have a chance of getting up to fourth position, as the gap is around 5 seconds, but may have to decrease as the Grand Prix goes on. But Tsunoda may not even have a chance to even catch up, as the gap is also about 8 seconds. And between himself and Verstappen is around 33 seconds, which is also quite insane. It is there for McLaren that they're currently suffering with a broken, faulty gun, and that they definitely need to fix it in order to figure out what is going on, because that gun so far is in fact causing a massive delay in it. Battle for second between Verstappen, no, between Leclerc and Norris of a gap between 1.3, but on the data is about 8 seconds. Actually, that's for Norris. Hamilton lost, yeah, 1.2, but Hamilton and Piastri is around 5 seconds. So it seems as if the positions for the pedestal, not pedestal, podium is basically Norris on third, Leclerc second, and Verstappen comfortably on first. It seems as if Leclerc so far is pretty much gonna give that glory back to Ferrari, as to show that there's something to be proud about with Ferrari. And now Ferrari fans are gonna go yippee, as that finally they have got a podium in this race. But Albert and Bortoletto are both boxing, and now Albert's box is 24.582 seconds. Well, Bortoletto's box could be a lot more shorter, a lot more bigger. Who knows? But his top stop time is 2 seconds, and in pit for 24 seconds. A lot more shorter. So it seems as if by the end of the year that Piastri and Norris may actually lose their top position of pretty much being the dominant one towards Verstappen, as at the points are pretty much going to be even closer towards Norris and Piastri than pretty much anyone else so far. Black and white flag for Bortoletto for track limits. But so far, it seems if Verstappen and Leclerc has a gap of 6 seconds, a gap between Norris and Hamilton of 9 seconds, gap between Hamilton's 9 seconds, gap between Russell and Tsunoda of 11 seconds, which is absolutely insane. But so far, we're actually going to see a nice battle between Norris and Leclerc for second place, which is absolutely insane, as that Norris is never going to let go of Leclerc's tail until he managed to grab it, yank himself up to second place. Because he's so close so far as that the gap is decreasing ever so slowly as the race progresses. But it's quite unfortunate that Carlos Sainz had to go out. It's quite unfortunate for Carlos Sainz as that during this season he has in fact got his car set on fire by the brakes and had gotten fucked over also when especially in this race. So it's quite unfortunate for Carlos Sainz in order to be out of this race. Let's in fact, I will mostly focus on the official broadcast and put the data as secondary. But it seems so far that Verstappen is quite comfortable, as that he may actually just secure his pole position, while Leclerc and Norris may actually in fact secure the podium finish. And so with black and white flags, quite unfortunate since this track is weaving all over the place. But to be honest, it wouldn't really be a surprise since Lando Norris's tyres are, and pretty much tyres in general in this race are gonna be extremely fragile since the temperature is absolutely insane in Austin, Texas. And that as the temperature even increases even more, it may even affect not only the tyres but the car's cells, as that cooling may be an impossibility. Snow charges ahead. We're in third position, making a nice gap between himself and Hulkenberg. Well, Hulkenberg has a nice fair gap between himself and Behrman. Behrman has a nice gap between Alonso, where pretty much Alonso has his train formation up, where he has a nice gap, close gap between himself and Lawson and Stroll, and therefore everyone else right behind him. Now, there are in fact multiple groups. Verstappen in his own group, Leclerc, Norris in his their versus group, Hamilton in his own group, Piastri literally trying to set about trying to make some more gap between himself and Russell, but it's a nice stretchy gap. Sonoda is making a nice gap, making sure that he's the only one, while Hulkenberg and Behrman has his own gap, while Alonso and Lawson has their own, with Stroll included also, and that Antonelli, pretty much everyone else is either their own group versus each other is literally insane. Lap 42 after out of 56. Mm. So it seems as if the tires are extremely fragile on Lando Norris, as that they keep on coming off. They're literally rolling as fast as they can. Literally, eventually, by around 45 or 46, they may in fact just erode. As that Norris tires are around. Damn, so basically Verstappen's getting affected by it also. So basically the temperature so far is so hot to the point that temperature of 46 degrees Celsius, air temperature of 29 degrees Celsius is starting to get even more hotter with a humidity of 20%, making so that a pressure of 1001 megabytes and a wind of 30 meters per second from the west. Pretty much, it's even hot track now, with basically making the tires even more fragile. So basically, you may actually see a gap decrease between Verstappen and Leclerc, as pretty much so far it seems like as if Verstappen is going to lose that dominance. But to be honest, though, it doesn't really matter since he's so far ahead. In fact, right, there's so few laps that he has a nice comfortable first finish, unless if Verstappen manages to simply screw up at one of the corners, which could be the case, especially when he just said that his tires are slipping a lot. So far, it seems like that gap has decreased from that obscure, literally impossibility of that 11-second gap. But I bet Max Verstappen really wants to achieve that again and try to at least get to the back marker that is Bortoletto. But to be honest though, so far, even if McLaren may actually lose in this one, they may have in fact just won the constructors since they are so far ahead, especially in their points. But however, Max Verstappen's points compared to the other drivers may actually catch up and verse Norris in contender points. It's so unfortunate because Piastri was forced in order to conserve his tyres, which if he didn't, he could have had a nice high position. He, but Lawrence could have in fact added that extra push that he could have had. So yeah, this so it just seems so far that nobody can overtake since the tires are degrading at an even faster pace because of the intense temperature. But yeah, it just seems like absolutely. So it seems if, especially for the American Grand Prix, that if it gets even more hotter, it could literally affect the cars, and it is so far, especially towards the tires. Because no matter how hard they try, they cannot even catch up to at least 200 because the drag on the tires is too much and makes it is extremely slippery. But to be honest, that gap between Charles Verstappen and Leclerc is looking quite good at 6. Uh, so yeah, there's nothing about much that is gonna happen since well, the absolute drag of the tires so far is absolutely insane to the point that well, there ain't gonna really be that much overtaking unless if someone manages to fuck up. quicker. Literally. But anyway, let's get back to it. It's a boring race, really. It's pretty much boring, cause so yeah, it is one of, if not the most boringest Grand Prixes I ever saw. Generally because there's not that much action, not that much overtaking, but the 2026 rule book is trying to make that more overtaking will be done and more action will be done, but that will in fact fuck up the car even more. Ooh. Now we see the nice switch up between Norris and Leclerc. So it seems as if the closest battle is Leclerc and Norris, as that their gap is around 0.475 or 0.3, which is quite close enough to start a nice battle. But let's see the gap so far. Currently 0.230. This is in fact the closest battle that we're going to have all the way down to... Ooh, Norris taking second place! That is absolutely beautiful! Oh, this is a massive achievement for Lando Norris. But I kind of wish Piastri could have not focused on conserving his tyres and more focused on actually overtaking, because he would have had a much more higher result, but he had to conserve his tyres, which is so fortunate. Okay, what is the lap so far? Who the fuck knows? Lap 53 out of 56. It's either quite boring, but yeah, quite boring indeed. Verstappen just catch up to back markers. That's absolutely wild. So far, let's see the gap between himself and the back marker of over a minute. Could be a lap eventually. It just seems like a comfortable race just to end with. One more lap left. Let's just see where Verstappen is. Almost there. I'll just simply think this is one boys one, and there's nothing that much to talk about because there's not really that much action. Even though there's a lot of close battles, the over intensive heat is preventing them because of the tires creating the absolute most drag as they can, pretty much making it a lot more slower. None of them reaching over 200 miles an hour. Ooh, Pierre Gasly, Franco Colapinto, where do I go? Touch to touch, wheel to wheel. But lucky there was a nice gap and they were in fact quite in sync and let Colapinto past. final lap. Mm. What have I felt the most boys want? You may be because why am I not talking? Well, you know why. Nothing that much to talk about really, apart from the fact that anything that much overtaking and that it's just still. Max Verstappen really loves the USA because he always wins here. Max Verstappen wins, then Norris in second, then Leclerc in third, Hamilton in fourth, Piastri in fifth, sixth is Russell, seventh is Sonoda, eighth is Hulkenberg, ninth is Behrman, 10th is Alonso, 11th is Lawson, 12th is Stroll, 13th is Antonelli, 14th is Albert, 15th is Ocon, and 16th is Hadjar, 17th is Colapinto, 18th is Bortoletto, 19th is Gasly. But yeah, that's the Grand Prix so far. 4 out of 10. Or 5. Fucking 4. It's boring as hell. Rise of America. And that's everything. I will see you guys next time when there's in fact